Yes, thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, for allowing me to intervene on this bill. First and foremost, Mr. Deputy Speaker, since Monday, we've been listening to the debates, to the speeches of honorable members from both sides of the House. And there are certain speeches and interventions that makes me feel awkward. Awkward, Mr. Deputy Speaker, because this is, as is being always repeated by the Speaker, this is the temple of democracy. And we are all honorable members. So we should show respect and restraint when we are making our speeches and not to hit below the belt. We should debate, we should be constructive in our approach, but we should not make speeches with venom. It applies to all members of this House. And we are being watched by our fellow Mauritian citizens. And for the decorum of this House, let us engage in debates. You can criticize, you can debate, you can agree or not agree on the views of certain members of the opposition or views from members of the government side, but do it with courtesy, with humility, less of arrogance, because people out there are watching us as to our acts and doings in this House, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker, as I intervene today, Mr. Deputy Speaker, our rupee suffers yet another depreciation, so that today $1 is selling at 44 rupees 50. And on this trend, we shall soon hit the 45 rupee for $1, Mr. Deputy Speaker. As I intervene today, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the construction price index rose by 46.7% in the last 3 months. So that construction costs are at a record high today, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Imagine somebody who prevails himself of the opportunity presented to him in that budget to go and purchase a plot of land to build a house and apply for a loan. Imagine how this fellow will have to comply with the current situation with regards to construction prices on the very high, 46.7% over the last 3 months. I intervene today, Mr. Deputy Speaker, with a trade deficit that have reached 16.5 billion rupees. 16.5 billion rupees. These are figures, these are facts from Statistics Mauritius. I intervene today, Mr. Deputy Speaker, with a public debt that has reached an alarming record of 450 billion rupees. 450 billion rupees. This is the background, Mr. Deputy Speaker, with regard to the situation we are debating on this bill. And as I intervene today, Mr. Deputy Speaker, unemployment, youth unemployment, is on the increase and remain high at 27.7%. These are alarming figures. These are disturbing figures. And this is why inflation is on the increase, and this is why inflation is now public enemy number one for our people in this country, Mr. Deputy Speaker. This is the background of alarming figures that, when translating same on the day-to-day living of our people, we do not need much analysis to ascertain that bread and butter issues are at the heart of the preoccupation of our people. Mr. Deputy Speaker, more than ever, the population had a legitimate expectation that the Honourable Minister of Finance, Economic Planning and Development would first and foremost come out and show to them that he understands the feeling of their day-to-day pain. And to cope with this cost of living crisis, he feels their pain, Mr. Deputy Speaker. The depreciation of the rupee, as I have mentioned, last year it was, when I was intervening on the budget last year, it was $1.41 rupees. I am intervening today, $1 is already 44.5 rupees in a lap of 1 year. Yet, not a single word in this budget on how the Honourable Minister will address this disquieting scenario, Mr. Deputy Speaker. The population at large, the consumers, are being seriously affected by this continued weakening of our rupee. For example, Mr. Deputy Speaker, retail prices of basic commodities. You go to the supermarket today, you will see milk, cheese, cereals have been increasing by more than 20%. During the last 6 months, rice also have increased, chicken, meat, medicines, and other pharmaceutical products are getting very expensive day by day. Go and ask, Mr. Deputy Speaker, our old age pensioners, our grandmothers and grandfathers, above 60 and above 65, that this 1,000 rupees that they are getting, those below 65 but in the bracket of 60 to 64, and those getting 2,000 rupees above the bracket of 65 years, go and ask them now. I've been in my constituency, Mr. Deputy Speaker, since the budget was pronounced. I've been in my constituency, and without any doubt, without being biased, I must say, on six people that are on 10 are unhappy that this sum that is being allocated to them does not suffice. I'm not exaggerating. This is not my intention, and I never exaggerate. These are the facts. These are the reality of people in my constituency. I do not know in other places because I have not had the opportunity to go to other places, but I'm talking about my constituency. The old age pensioners are not happy because for the following reasons that I will go on to quote somebody who is not a member of the opposition, who is not a friend of mine, and who is not acquainted to me, but who is acquainted to many Mauritians. I will quote him to prove why our old age pensioners are not happy with that 1,000 and 2,000 rupees. Mr. Deputy Speaker, what I'm saying to you is not new, because this is what has been expressed in a study conducted by Afrobarometer. Some people may not agree with this study. Some people will compare it with other opinion polls. This is not an opinion poll on politics, on how many percentage a party is worth now when elections is in 2 or 3 years' time. This is a study about the reality of Mauritians, what they are facing currently. This has got nothing to do about politics. This study, the Mauritians say that the country is going in the wrong direction and that the economic situation will probably worsen. We're talking about 2/3 of the population, as per the sampling of this survey, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And they are also very concerned, and the top priority that they want this government to address is management of the economy, unemployment, and the issue of law and order, crime and security, Mr. Deputy Speaker. The Honourable Minister of Finance would have been sensible enough to prioritize his action plan for the country to face this unprecedented situation, which we all accept, we do accept, has been aggravated by the COVID-19 pandemic and the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine. That is why, Mr. Deputy Speaker, debates on this bill are important. are passionate, and honourable members from both sides of the House, we are providing our views and opinions, but also voicing out for our constituents, Mr. Deputy Speaker, who have elected us to be their voice in Parliament. I pause here, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to express my dismay as to how and why some honourable members from the other side of the House will always indulge in criticising the opposition when we are voicing out our views. Yesterday night, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the way the opposition whip, Honourable Armance, was disturbed by some honourable members from the other side of the House when he was still addressing this August Assembly did not go well in the eyes of the public. Why I say so, Mr. Deputy Speaker? Because since this morning, many people have drawn my attention to this fact, and they view same as a sign of arrogance from overzealous parliamentarians from the other side of the House. One should ponder on the fact that, I will repeat it, 1 week is a long time in politics. 1 week is a long time in politics, and this dictum applies to each and every one of us in this August Assembly. So arrogance as parliamentarians will serve no purpose, because in 2.5 years or 3 years' time, the population of Mauritius will judge each and every one of us. So stop to be arrogant and overzealous in your interventions. Previous orators from both sides of the House since Monday have vividly made an autopsy of the budget. While some are agreeable with all the measures that are being proposed, there are others who disagree, and this is why we have been elected, and this is why you have an opposition to oppose. In debates, you have opposition to oppose. So don't feel offended when we are opposing, because you've got the executive to execute all these measures. This is the functioning of parliamentary democracy, Mr. Deputy Speaker. We have to respect the views of each and every one and be kind enough to preserve the sanctity of this temple of democracy by our acts and doings. During his speech, my good friend, Honourable Minister Kalichern, said that this budget was a walkover. And I noticed this trend from other honourable members from the other side of the House. This is not the true picture that is being depicted, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Please bear with me, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I shall extensively relate views of those people and stakeholders who are not members of the opposition, neither from my constituency, nor supporters of opposition parties, but respected professionals who are reported to have said the following in the press and on social media. I shall quote Mr. Anthony Lungshing, country senior partner, PwC Mauritius, and I quote, "Overall, the budget contains a series of micro measures for the people with no real game changer for businesses. The government appears to rely on the economic recovery to drive activity levels with some policy measures targeted to promote specific industries. Although maintaining the status quo in taxes is welcome, we were expecting more to improve the country's attractiveness to talents. The danger ahead remains the high rate of inflation, which may undermine investments and consumption. A downturn in these two factors will slow down economic activity and will lead us in troubled waters." Manisha Dukoni, Mr. Deputy Speaker, well-respected economist, I quote, "Le ministre des Finances se base sur l'objectif d'accueillir 1,4 million de touristes pour atteindre 8,5% de croissance. Et si l'on tient compte des chiffres d'arrivée touristique pour les 5 derniers mois, l'on pourrait atteindre environ que 800 000 touristes à la fin de l'année. Et pas plus tard que la semaine dernière, l'Organisation de coopération et de développement économique a réduit ses prévisions de croissance mondiale. Les prévisions de 8,5% pour Maurice sont trop optimistes. Takesh Lakou, Mr. Deputy Speaker, a well-respected economist. Je pense que la priorité aurait dû être une baisse conséquente des taxes et des contributions sur l'essence. C'était une des attentes fortes de la population. L'essence est un triggering product qui affectent beaucoup d'autres produits grandement consommés par la population, on peine à trouver des mesures orientées vers le développement économique futur du pays. Giant Chelum, secrétaire général de la CIM. And this is what the old age pensioners have been telling me. Contrairement aux salariés, les retraités n'ont pas obtenu la compensation annuelle de 300 roupies en 2020, 375 roupies en 2021 et 500 roupies en 2022. Le total fait 1175 roupies, c'est plus que les 1000 roupies accordées maintenant aux 60 à 64 ans. Quant aux plus de 65 ans, cela ne fait que 875 roupies sur les 2000 roupies. I now quote Rachid Imrit, président de la Fédération des syndicats du secteur public. Il craint une élimination graduelle de la pension de vieillesse à 60 ans. Jacqueline Sauzier, secrétaire générale de la Chambre d'agriculture de Maurice, dit noter une volonté pour assurer la sécurité alimentaire, mais elle déplore qu'on pêche au niveau du plan stratégique à mettre en place pour aller dans cette direction. I quote, nous manquons ce framework qui nous permettra de savoir qui produit quoi et quand, afin que nous puissions mieux planifier notre production. Elle souligne aussi l'importance de ne pas couper les herbes sous les pieds des planteurs. Et elle prend comme exemple la plantation de carottes. Pour la carotte, par exemple, des permis d'importation ont été accordés alors que nous étions en pleine récolte. Du coup, les planteurs ont été perdants. Jacqueline Sauzier insiste aussi pour le stockage intelligent. Pour la production de pommes de terre se fait en juillet à décembre. Or, elle note que l'Agricultural Marketing Board a une capacité de stockage de seulement 2 mois. Elle cite l'exemple d'Israël où là-bas, ils peuvent stocker des pommes de terre pour une durée de 8 mois. Et elle dit, en conclusion, il faut une volonté politique. Mr. Krit Bihari, porte-parole de la plateforme Planteurs des îles, il évoque pour sa part business as usual, effet d'annonce. Il déplore notamment la grande différence entre ce qui est annoncé et ce qui est faisable. Concrètement, il cite la production de pommes de terre. Mr. Deputy Speaker, these people are not members of the opposition. They are not also advisors of members of the opposition. These are respected people from the civil society that have expressed their views. Like my other honourable colleagues have cited views from their constituents, I have not done so from my constituents. I have quoted people of the civil society, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And coming on the sector, the agricultural sector, while going through the past budget speeches, it has been observed that government has put forward many interesting and promising projects, which, if successfully implemented, would have surely created an impact and changed the whole agricultural scenery. A few excerpts, amongst others, of the budget speeches are mentioned. In 2015-2016 budget speech, Mr. Deputy Speaker, paragraph 76, I quote, to encourage production of biofood, we are introducing a bio-farming development certificate. In the same budget speech, mention was also made for the setting up of a heifer farm for young cow at Melrose by the Ministry of Agro-Industry, and funds to the tune of 10 million rupees was also earmarked, and same is catered for at paragraph 78. In the budget speech of 2017-2018, it was highlighted, I quote, the potential for establishing macadamia plantations in Mauritius as a new export niche and create new employment opportunities. I want to ask, maybe through my research I didn't see it, I want to ask, where are we? How many macadamia have we harvested till now? How many? 2017, 2018. At paragraph 75, we also ask for the introduction of the Food Processing Development Certificate for importations of products to be used as raw materials for processing and re-exports. Mention also is made of the Biofarming Development Certificate. Likewise, also many laudable projects were announced in Budget Speech 2018-2019 with regards to support to set up 100 farms over the next 2 years under the Sheltered Farming Scheme, and also in the Budget Speech 2019-2020, construction of, again, 100 more sheltered farms. And yet, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, maybe when members from the other side of the House will rebut to what I'm saying, would provide me and will prove me wrong, that the figures that are advancing, that the measures that were announced have been executed. Mr. Deputy Speaker, rightly so, the Honourable Minister of Finance, rightly so, has laid much emphasis on food security. And I agree with him. This should be what we should address as a matter of urgency, food security. So there are many measures that have been announced in this budget that I agree with, but my issue is again with implementation. It's very nice to announce. I know the Honourable Minister has got good intention. I know my good friend, the Honourable Minister of Agro-Industry, they've got good intention. But what about the implementation of those measures that have been announced? Because when I refer to what have been said in the past, most of the measures have not yet been implemented. So this is an issue that should be looked at, because most of the measures will not cater for the 80% of petits planteurs who are not the owners of their plot of land. And most of them will not be eligible to the financial packages and incentives being proposed by DBM Limited. Mr. Deputy Speaker, instead, I have noticed in this budget something quite puzzling, that if introduced without consultation and without having a broad consensus within the cane industry, will put in jeopardy this industry. Mr. Deputy Speaker, at section C26 of the annex document to the budget speech, there is a proposed amendment to the Mauritius Cane Industry Authority Act, namely to allow sugar producers to deliver sugar to the Mauritius Sugar Syndicate, and now it is being proposed that it will be amended to include, they are including this part, or any other authorized body as may be approved by the Mauritius Cane Industry Authority. It suffices to reasonably assume that what the GRA has been doing to the horse racing industry, now such state capture with the proposed amendment might be looming over this cane industry, as it seems to me, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that no prior consultation has been held with the stakeholders of the industry. Maybe more clarity on this issue is needed from both the Honourable Minister of Finance and the Minister of Agro-Industry. Because if this is the case, then we are creating disturbance within the cane industry sector, within all the stakeholders. And it is not the time to do so right now. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I've been asked by my learned colleagues of the Mauritius Bar Association and also from other people in the legal profession to talk about the judiciary. Again, the judiciary, Mr. Deputy Speaker, l'enfant pauvre de ce budget. L'enfant pauvre de ce budget, Monsieur le Président, because in last year's budget, at paragraph 334, it was announced that there will be a new legislation in place for the setting up of a separate court of appeal. In this budget speech, no mention at all of where matters stand. And I will again extensively lay emphasis on the need for a separate court of appeal as requested by many of my fellow colleagues in the judiciary and in the legal profession, because it seems that we do not understand the importance of having a separate Court of Appeal. And I appeal to the Honourable Minister that this should be taken care of, and if amendment need to be brought, it need to be brought. Why, Mr. Speaker, sir? Because Section 83, subsection 3 of the Constitution provides, and I quote, "The judges of the Court of Civil Appeal and Court of Criminal Appeal shall be judges for the time being of the Supreme Court." It was a temporary measure, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Back in 1968, the framers of our Constitution made a temporary provision for the judges of the Supreme Court to also hear appeals. It is unfortunate that after 54 years, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the temporary setup intended by this provision has somewhat become a permanent feature. It is inconceivable, to say the least, that a judge is expected to sit with another judge to hear a case, and the next day, either one of them may be called upon to hear an appeal against the judgment of the other. This state of affairs is unhealthy for our judiciary, a pillar of our democracy, and cannot be allowed to persist. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the report, what we call the Mackay Report, the Presidential Commission, to examine and report upon the structure and operation of the judicial system and legal profession of Mauritius, was made public in 1997, Mr. Deputy Speaker. The setting up of the commission chaired by Lord Mackay was the initiative of the former Prime Minister, Dr. Navin Ramgoolam, and former Attorney General Razak Pirous, Senior Counsel. And in several chapters of this report, it has been described why we need such a separate Court of Appeal. And I quote the paragraph 3.4 of this report: "The perception of the Court of Appeal section as a distinct court would be enhanced if it sat in a distinct building from the other courts. Now that the Supreme Court is located in a new building, the old Supreme Court building can be renovated and used to house the Court of Appeal section and the new High Court section," Mr. Deputy Speaker. And this government should ponder on this issue and allocate budget for the renovation and preservation of the old new Supreme Court building. In that respect, Mr. Deputy Speaker, there are already two draft bills, the Constitution Amendment Bill and the Judicial and Legal Provision Bill, that way back in 2013 was ready. And I would urge government to bring it, because in the political manifesto of l'Alliance Les Peuples in 2014, they talk about une nouvelle cour d'appel complètement indépendante et constituée de juges étrangers sera créée. So the MSM has been in government for nearly 7.5 years now, Mr. Deputy Speaker. They need to walk the talk and bring on this novel approach in our judiciary. I do not know how many minutes I'm left with.
11 minutes.
12. Okay, thank you. I will talk a little bit on financial services. Again, mention of the Financial Crime Commission. Again, way back in 2015, there was a PNQ from Honorable Béranger, whereby a lengthy answer from the Right Honorable former Prime Minister Saniro Jagnat, who gave a detailed answer why we need and why we are going ahead with that Financial Crime Commission. 2016, nothing. 2017, nothing. 2021, there was a budget of 10 million allocated. 2022, again, a budget of 10 million rupees allocated. Where is the Financial Crime Commission bill, Mr. Deputy Speaker? This doesn't fit the bill for those in the financial services sector, whereby I share the views of many of the people in the financial services industry to express the disappointment that this major component to make our international financial center more attractive, because financial crimes, as you will know, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, being a lawyer, is a very complex issue. that cannot be investigated by many authorities. The Financial Services Commission, they do not have people, and the law doesn't allow them. They have to send the file to the central CID. And at the CCID, these people, I'm afraid, they do not have the required competency with regard to financial crimes. And that is why inquiries will take loads of time to be completed. And in the meantime, with regard to financial crimes, if we've got foreigners in the country, they will leave the country, like Alvaro Sobrino, and nothing will happen. So this is the sad state we badly need in our international financial sector, a financial crime commission. And I would also express my disappointment that the financial services industry, Honorable Siratan, has done a very good job as minister because we are out of those lists, but he should have been provided now with ways and means to market our financial services sector, as we are providing for the Ministry of Tourism through the MTPA 400 million to promote Mauritius as a tourist destination. His ministry should have been provided with finance, with means to market the International Financial Center of Mauritius in the aftermath of us getting out of all those ominous lists. So for me, this is a big manquement in this budget, that no budget for marketing strategy of the financial services sector have been given to the Ministry of Financial Services. And I will also, Mr. Deputy Speaker, invite the Honourable Minister of Finance, but also the Honourable Minister of Financial Services, to look at the novel situation of Mauritius being a non-aligned movement country to attract Russian millionaires. There has been a study done by the migration data that more than 15,000 multimillionaires from Russia are expected to leave this country due to the prevailing and ongoing war. The data suggests that their top destinations and countries that are welcoming them are the United States, the United Kingdom, and the United Arab Emirates. Again, with a robust marketing strategy, this may be beneficial for our financial sector to attract them to Mauritius, and I would urge both ministries to work in that direction. In the same vein, Mr. Deputy Speaker, as announced, there is a strategy to capture people in the bracket that we call the silver economy. This economy is worth 15 trillion USD. 15 trillion USD. I would again urge the government to come with strategies to attract at least 0.01% of that market. Again, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the blue economy. Nothing has been said in this budget with regard to the port. I asked a PQ to the Honourable Prime Minister on the 26th of April 2022 with regards to the breakwater construction in the Portrush Harbour, and he informed the House that there will be a review of the port master plan, and this will come very soon. They are reviewing the whole port master plan. Yet again, I would have expected the Honourable Minister of Finance to include this in his budget and allocate appropriate sums for the conduct of this port master plan. Mr. Deputy Speaker, it is worth pointing out that this is an important pillar. This could be a new pillar to our economy. 80% of international goods traded are transported by sea, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And we've got in our nearby waters around 35,000 vessels annually, which translate to nearly 100 vessels per day that we can attract in our port, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Yet again, nothing has been said on this issue by the Honourable Minister of Finance in his budget speech. Law and order issue, Mr. Deputy Speaker, policing. For a country to move on, social coherence and stability are of utmost importance. Just providing 10.9 billion rupees for the budget of the police services is not the solution. The P&Q on torture and the latest outcry of the horrible videos of torture that we have all witnessed are cruel reality that more than ever, as described by the DPP in its latest newsletter, the Police and Criminal Justice Bill, which is ready since long, should be introduced before this House with a certificate of urgency. This will cater to do away with all those police officers who do not follow a proper code of conduct. And this will also do away with what we call the system of provisional charge, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir. Building a 5-star police academy is not the solution for the time being. The solution is we should cater for the mental health of our police officers. For the many police officers who are working in deplorable conditions, and I will invite all members of this House to go and attend in your constituency police stations. Go and see the conditions in which all those police officers are working, whether they have a proper table or chair to sit on. They have got a serious issue of mental health. And this is not just the case in Mauritius. A latest study in the United Kingdom has revealed that 41% of police officers, they suffer from mental health problems, Mr. Speaker, sir. So there are policemen there who are ill, who need to be looked at, who need to be cared for. So I invite again this government, through the budget, this 10.9 billion rupees should not only go for payments of salaries. There should be additional sums catered for their well-being. Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, coming to my constituency again, there ought to have been the new Phoenix police station, still coming, still waiting for it. But in terms of community development, nothing again for constituency number 15, same repetitive measures with regards to drain. But Mr. Deputy Speaker, as elected member of number 15, I'm also very disappointed that the township of Vakwa Phoenix has not been considered in the context of the 12 Fêtes Nationales that will be organized throughout the year 2023 to celebrate our 55th anniversary of our country's independence. What a lack of courtesy when we all know that this township has as inhabitants 2 former Prime Ministers, Dr. Navin Ramgoolam and Honorable Béranger. 1 current Prime Minister, Honorable Pravin Kumar Jagnnath. And we had a former President and Prime Minister, late Sir Anirudh Jagnnath. So I believe that the Honorable Minister should rectify this manquement, and the township of Vakwa Phoenix should be in that list. And to conclude, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, I propose that 2,000 rupees instead of 1,000 rupees should be given to all people earning less than 25,000 rupees. We have to increase the national minimum wage by up to 2,000 rupees by using the money amassed in all those funds that have plenty of money, and introduce food and pharmaceutical vouchers for the most vulnerable groups. I also urge the Honourable Minister that he can do it. If this government wants to be with the people, for the people, this government should also learn to hear the people and feel the pain of our people facing this unprecedented cost of living crisis. I'm done, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Thank you.